In today's episode, we analyze Jake Chambers' understanding of the truth. And yes, we can handle the truth. We look at what the Lord of the Flies and Catch-22 have to do with our story, and we choo-choo-choose until the cows come home. And I choo-choo-choose, y'all, my Dark Tower friends. Welcome back to Dark Tower YouTube, where we're doing a deep psychological dive into the magic, the mystery, and the metaphysics of Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. So glad to be back with you here. This is where I like to be. This is my happy Dark Towery place. We left Jake losing his mind and feeling torn about his love for Roland. Poor Jake. We're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to cover only chapters 2 and 3 from the section called Key and Rose, and this is in the third book of the Dark Tower series, The Wastelands, Book 1, Jake. Got that? Only chapters 2 and 3. Because there's a ton of things to talk about here. Did you guys read the final essay and we're like, wow, what? Oh, yeah, we're gonna pick it apart. And I did a special bonus episode just of the final essay, but that's for everybody else who's kind of read the series, read this book. And we're going to do the book club edition of the analysis. So there is some overlap, but don't watch that bonus video until you finished The Wastelands. We're going to go through not only the essay, but also what the English teacher is on about interrupting the essay, because all of it matters to our reading and understanding and analysis of this story. Are you ready? I'm ready. So let's dive in. We're gonna pick up with Jake, who is obsessed with doors. And King writes, in the last 10 days or so, as the voices in his head grew louder and louder, Jake had become more and more fascinated with doors. All kinds of doors. He must have opened the one between his bedroom and the upstairs hallway 500 times in just the last week. And the one between his bedroom and the bathroom, 1,000. Each time he did it, he felt a tight ball of hope and anticipation in his chest, as if the answer to all of his problems lay somewhere behind this door or that one, and he would surely find it eventually. But each time, it was only the hall, or the bathroom, or the front walk, or whatever. A little later in this segment. Now, as he approached the cloakroom door, he felt that same dazzling burst of hope, a certainty that the door would not open on a shadowy closet containing only the persistent smells of winter, flannel, rubber, and wet wool, but on some other world where he could be whole again. Hot, dazzling light would fall across the classroom floor in a widening triangle, and he would see birds circling in a faded blue sky the color of his eyes. Old jeans. A desert wind would blow his hair back and dry the nervous sweat on his brow. He would step through this door and be healed. Jake turned the knob and opened the door. Inside was only darkness and a row of gleaming brass hooks. One long forgotten mitten lay near the stacked piles of blue books in the corner. His heart sank, and suddenly Jake felt like simply creeping into that dark room with its bitter smells of winter and chalk dust. He could move the mitten and sit in the corner under the coat hooks. He could sit on the rubber mat where you were supposed to put your boots in the wintertime. He could sit there, put his thumb in his mouth, pull his knees tight against his chest, close his eyes, and just give up. the idea, the relief of this idea was incredibly attractive. It would be an end to the terror and confusion and dislocation. That last was somehow the worst. That persistent feeling that his whole life had turned into a funhouse mirror maze. Yet, there was deep steel in Jake Chambers, as surely as there was deep steel in Eddie and Susanna. Now, it flashed out its dour blue lighthouse gleam in the darkness. There would be no giving up. Whatever was loose inside him might tear his sanity away from him in the end. But he would give it no quarter in the meantime. Be damned if he would. Wow. Okay, so just amazing, gorgeous writing here. And I remember the first time, I love The Wastelands. Have I told you 5 billion times that it's my favorite, only when I'm reading another book, and then that's my favorite. But I love The Wastelands, and this idea with the obsession of doors, portals to another world. And I was so into that when I read this, and just was praying, hoping that he would open the door and there would be the portal. I wanted that so badly for Jake. I want him to get back as much as he wants to get back. Don't you feel that? King just brings that into this writing, the pool of this other world. And that idea where he says the faded blue sky, the color of his eyes, in parentheses, before he says old Jean. So that thinking beneath the thinking of the love of Roland, the wanting to be back with him. The feeling of despair characterized by the smells of a winter closet, I think it's perfect, because we're just in this dark, kind of dank, wet, stinky space. And we feel that despair. We feel it. And then Jake sounds a lot like Roland here at the end of that passage, doesn't he? We remember Roland in both The Gunslinger and The Drawing of the Three, dead, a dead man walking, and yet saying, if I am going to die, I'm going to die crawling to the tower. I'll be damned if anything is going to stop me in my mission. So this feels like a big echo of that kind of language that we were shown through King's writing and Roland's internal thoughts. Jake is a gunslinger. So we're being told that here, the deep steel idea that has come up before in this series, Jake has it. So King is like, there it is, he's a gunslinger. And he lumps him in with Eddie and Susanna, which we're not talking about them here. They're not in this section at all. This is all Jake, but King is reminding us, King is bringing those characters back in and saying Jake, Eddie, and Susanna are the same. And of course, they're all three from New York City, so we know that, but we just maybe aren't thinking about it. But King wants us to think about that. Pretty cool. Jake goes back to his seat. He is in English class. They had to write a final essay, 2,000 to 5,000 words on my understanding of truth, which just, I probably had to write an essay like that when I was in 6th grade. We all had to write something like that. In this particular story, it's very interesting because this is a character who's losing his mind. He doesn't know what's real. He doesn't know what's not real. And we're asking him, what do you think is true? So a cool concept that makes sense in the context of a 6th grade English classroom, but also makes the story much more interesting when we see what Jake is going to write. He looks down at his desk and he sees the final essay, which he has no recollection of writing. And on the front there is pictures that he cut out and pasted on, a picture of 10 Downing Street, a picture of an Amtrak train. And we'll talk about those when we get to the end of the essay. So here it is, and I'm going to read this word for word, what King wrote, including the interruptions from Miss Avery. So it's a lot, but we need to just put our listening ears on and kind of get ready to pick apart every single thing that we're hearing. King writes, My Understanding of Truth by John Chambers. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. T.S. Butch Eliot. My first thought was, he lied in every word. Robert Sundance Browning. The gunslinger is the truth. Roland is the truth. The prisoner is the truth. The lady of shadows is the truth. The prisoner and the lady are married. That is the truth. The way station is the truth. The speaking demon is the truth. We went under the mountain. That is the truth. There were monsters under the mountain. That is the truth. One of them had an Amoco gas pump between his legs and was pretending it was his penis. That is the truth. Roland let me die. That is the truth. I still love him. That is the truth. And it is so very important that you all read The Lord of the Flies, Miss Avery was saying in her clear but somehow pale voice. And when you do, you must ask yourself certain questions. A good novel is often like a series of riddles within riddles. And this is a very good novel, one of the best written in the second half of the 20th century. So ask yourself, what the symbolic significance of the conch shell might be. Second, far away, far, far away. Turn to the second page of his final essay with a trembling hand, leaving a dark smear of sweat on the first page. When is a door not a door? When it's ajar, and that is the truth. Blaine is the truth. Blaine is the truth. What has 4 wheels and flies? A garbage truck, and that is the truth. Blaine is the truth. You have to watch Blaine all the time. Blaine is a pain, and that is the truth. I'm pretty sure that Blaine is dangerous, and that is the truth. What is black and white and red all over? A blushing zebra, and that is the truth. I want to go back, and that is the truth. I have to go back, and that is the truth. I'll go crazy if I don't go back, and that is the truth. I can't go home again unless I find a stone, a rose, a door, and that is the truth. Choo-choo, and that is the truth. Choo-choo, choo-choo. Choo-choo, choo-choo, choo-choo. Choo-choo, 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 choo-choo. I am afraid, and that is the truth. Choo-choo. Now let me say a word about Catch-22, Miss Avery said from the front of the room. This is a very challenging book for 6th and 7th grade students, but you will nonetheless find it entirely enchanting if you open your minds to its special charms. You may think of this novel, if you like, as a comedy of the surreal. I don't need to read something like that, Jake thought. I'm living something like that, and it's no comedy. He turned over the last page of his final essay. There were no words on it. Instead, he had used a crayon to scribble it black. The dark, waxy lines looped and swooped in lunatic coils. He could remember doing none of this. Absolutely none of it. I don't know where that Miss Avery voice came from. I was channeling her perhaps. So that was a little weird. My apologies if it was very weird. Jake doesn't remember writing this. So let's start there. This is a child who we saw back in The Gunslinger was psychic. He had the touch, or the shinning, as we like to say around here. And we noticed that that was getting stronger as he was in Roland's world. Well, now he's back in New York City, and we hadn't seen anything about that until this idea of the door. So he has an idea of the portals. But this essay is Jake's psychic mind coming alive, and he just doesn't remember it. He was channeling this information. He sat and wrote all of this with no recollection of it. And people who channel, so that's where a human vessel opens their mind up to external, seemingly external influences. And I could channel Mary Magdalene. Somebody has. Lots of people have. I could channel an alien. There are lots of those people around as well. Sometimes they have quite interesting things to say. Shout out in the comments if you like any of those folks. Anyway, that's what Jake did. He channeled this other world, this other part of himself, and wrote all of this down this is a piece of art, isn't it? So the psychic shinning part of Jake is alive and well. So we'll kind of start off there. Jake opens his essay with the same quote that Stephen King opened this novel. Fear in a Handful of Dust is that excerpt from the T.S. Eliot poem, The Wastelands. So Jake Chambers not only kind of channeling information about what he went through, what's going on, perhaps what's to come, but also kind of channeling Stephen King, mirroring Stephen King. That's wild. Totally wild. He lied, and every word is from Child Roland to the Dark Tower Came. And King also used that poem to open up this novel. Not the same line, but I want to say that it's a parallel, again, the order that it happened and the same poems. And I want to say that because of all that mirroring that we've seen so far, that's pointing to Jake talking about Roland here. This is my hypothesis. Disagree with me. You have to have supporting arguments for your debate. But King was talking about the brute that was walking through, chopping down the thistle stalks everywhere he went. And then we thought about it when we read that part where Roland killed Shardik, and he was talking about my new friends, and we're weaving our poisonous circle, strand by poisonous strand, and things falling dead. And that we said, that's the same idea as that brute that King was talking about. So I think that was Roland. Jake talking about Roland here. Yeah, why? Because he was lied to in the desert with Roland. He lied in every word. Do you remember Roland? Like this awful version of Roland that we're still kind of mad at? Saying to Jake, what did he say? You'll be all right. I'll take care. When Jake knew that Roland was going to sacrifice him. That's what Roland said to him. Liar, liar, pants on fire. And he continued to lie to him for most of the time that they were together. So he lied in every word. Yes, Roland did to Jake. The other reason I want to talk about that I think this could be Roland talking about, Jake talking about Roland, is because of that Sundance and Butch reference. So why bring Butch and Sundance into this? So Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was a 1969 buddy western, and the Sundance Kid was kind of the sidekick. Butch was kind of more the leader of the gang, but they had each other's backs. They were strong together. They did everything together. They went down together, presumably, although the ending's a little vague. And we're looking at those quotes through that context of like buddies, friends till the end, Western tropey kind of stuff. Jake is the kid. Obviously, he's the Sundance Kid, and obviously Roland is Butch because Jake's a kid. Also, his dad, we've been told several times, refers to him as the kid. Only the kid, not using his name. Maybe we haven't been told that several times, but at least once, where Jake is called the kid by his father. And then we remember Roland calling Jake the boy, and those similarities between Elmer, Chambers, and Roland that we talked about, I think, last time. But so I think it's fair to say that the Sundance Kid is kind of owning this one quote and Roland Butch owning the other. And Roland could kind of talk about fear in a handful of dust. Fear in a handful of dust, Jake could say that because that's what he experienced in the desert. But Roland could also say that because the desert was not kind to him. He had a bad time there. It wasn't on his vision board, I don't think. So that could be Roland talking about the desert. It could also be Roland talking about the wastelands, which we haven't seen yet, but we're expecting them to show up in a book called The Wastelands. I am. So we'll see, but I think that kind of makes sense. And then to say that the Sundance Kid saying he lied in every word, talking about Butch, talking about Roland. What do you think? Next up, we get to the gunslinger is the truth, Roland is the truth, etc. This is the near present. This is what's going on in Roland's world. Eddie, Susanna, they're together. They're with Roland. Jake doesn't know this. How could he know this? So this is him channeling that other world. And it's true. So this is called My Understanding of the Truth. And we're sadly opening up with ideas of fear and lies, which is heartbreaking. But then we go on to see that Jake does understand the truth. This is the truth. We've been reading the book. We know about the prisoner, the lady they're married. Yes, that is true. And that sets us, the reader, up to read the rest of this poem and think everything else that follows is probably true as well. Jake is channeling the truth here in this essay. The way station is the truth. That part comes next, the speaking demon, all the things that happened to Jake while he was with Roland. So this is now moving to the past. So it's kind of present Roland's world, and then past Roland's world is what we move into next. Of course, all of those things are true and happened. We leave that section with Roland, let me die. That is the truth. I still love him. That is the truth. This is big. This is really big because he has these two truths in one space. This man killed me and I love him. Those would seem like opposite things, but Jake is holding them together. And this is a split, the split beneath the split of Jake being alive and dead in one world and the other. But the split of in that world, he loved this man and this man betrayed him. And that's big unresolved trauma there, conflict there, that we have to keep an eye out for. I'm already keeping an eye on it, and I want you to remember that we ended last week's episode with Jake having this thought about how he had almost come to love this man, but he let me fall. He killed me. Do you remember that? So there is that inner conflict brewing up to the surface. This is the same sentiment, but it's in reverse order. So before, Jake is saying, I almost loved him, but he killed me. And he ends on that kind of negative. Here, Roland let me die, which is a little softer language than he killed me. So there's perhaps a little bit of forgiveness there. And then that almost, I love him. I still love him. So we've become much more declarative in the feeling of love. And this is the truth, because this is Jake channeling the actual truth, if we're to read it in the way that I'm interpreting it, which I think is the right way. Argue with me if you would like. So I think that's cool, where love conquers the expression of fear, mistrust, what happened. I still love him. That's where he ends that statement. Next up, the essay is interrupted. Our reading of the essay is interrupted, and so is Jake's. And we have Miss Avery talking about the Lord of the Flies. And she's saying, you must ask yourself certain questions, and talking about riddles. A good novel is like riddles within riddles, and this novel, Lord of the Flies, is one of the best. Why is King telling us this? He's asking us to ask ourselves certain questions. Where are the riddles in this novel that we are reading? The questions, so the riddles in The Lord of the Flies, there's not classic traditional riddles, but there are in Lord of the Rings, in The Hobbit specifically, and we know that King is modeling the Dark Tower series on the Lord of the Rings, and so he loves the Lord of the Rings, he loves The Hobbit, he loves the idea of riddles in that story, and we're paying attention. And then she's saying great stories have riddles. Now, King is not a man who's all full of himself, but I think he would like to think that this is an amazing novel, and so it's going to contain riddles. But in The Lord of the Flies, the riddles are more the symbology. And Miss Avery is saying you must ask yourself certain questions. What does the conch shell symbolize? What does the conch shell, I think it's a conch. And then what are we going to be, we have to be asking about symbols that we're seeing in this novel. So King is not just filling up time here. He interrupted the essay to put this in and bring this novel to our attention. So let's dig a little deeper like we love to do here. The Lord of the Flies. King loves the Lord of the Rings, but he also loves the Lord of the Flies. And he has mentioned it not only in this novel, but also you'll see the Lord of the Flies have mentioned in Cujo, Misery, and Hearts in Atlantis. He brings this novel up a lot. There's a character in Lord of the Flies named Jack, and he sets up a mountain camp. He's kind of the bad boy, and I think it's funny that he's a redhead. Anyway, he names their mountain group, village, hideout, Castle Rock. And so King took that and named his fictional main town Castle Rock. And Rob Reiner, R.I.P., called his production company Castle Rock Entertainment based on Stephen King's pulling of Castle Rock from the story, or was it just Rob Reiner pulling it from Lord of the Flies? Hard to say, because Rob Reiner worked on some things with Stephen King and really enjoyed his work. Anyway, we're seeing it show up in the real world, or even the fictional world of Stephen King, and that's from The Lord of the Flies. I don't know that I knew that before I did this deep dive, so some of you might not have known that. Some of you out there did, and you tell me in the comments if you already knew that, because you are a bigger Stephen King nerd than I am, and I salute you for that. You are my friend. Stephen King says that his novel It was influenced by Lord of the Flies. This is Stephen King now. I thought to myself I'd really like to write a story about what's gained and what's lost when you go from childhood to adulthood, and also the things we experience in childhood that are like seeds that blossom later on. Beautiful. And when you look at it that way, the idea of one of the themes of Lord of the Flies being childhood innocence lost, and if you've read it, we're all about that in that novel. Other themes in Lord of the Flies: morality, leadership, and the tension between civility and chaos. And when we think about those themes, we could pretty much do a one-for-one swap with the themes in The Gunslinger. What's right and what's wrong? I'm a leader, but am I doing the right thing here? And that idea of the world has moved on. What happened? There was a first draft of Lord of the Flies where the whole first section was about nuclear war and evacuation from the horrors of nuclear war. I didn't read it. I wonder if Stephen King did. I think you can get your hands on it, and him being such a big fan, he knew about it anyway. And we think about, again, back in The Gunslinger, the idea of the slow mutants, these remnants that we don't fully know what happened, but they're glowing and they have sores. It smacks of nuclear war, and that subway station that was seemingly taken over by the military, and some kind of poisonous gas was used on them. We had to draw some conclusions about, as Roland did, that there was some kind of catastrophic, event that happened. Also, this book, the one we're reading, is called The Wastelands. And so that also marries nicely with the idea of civility versus chaos. Again, we haven't seen it yet, but we are not dummies over here, so we're on the lookout for the wastelands and for that theme to expand in this story. Let's move on to the idea of riddles. So we have Miss Avery saying you must ask yourself certain questions. The main riddle in The Lord of the Flies, one of the main riddles, is who is the beast really? So we have the riddle of the conch shell, and we'll talk about that. But the riddle of who is the beast really, I think Stephen King picked that idea up and ran with it. So the riddle of who is the beast, who is the bad guy, who is the good guy in this story. In Lord of the Flies, if you didn't read it, I believe I went to visit the William Golding, I should have said that, it was a William Golding story from 1950 something. And they're making a show. I think it's on already. It's a British show, and I'm excited for that. I've watched the original. I read the book a long time ago, and then there's a movie, a black and white movie that's not bad, but this new show could be great. Anyway, what was I talking about? The beast, right. So the children end up on a desert island. If you don't know, if you really don't want to know anything about Lord of the Flies, pause, come back in a few minutes, because I'm going to give you some, I'm not going to spoil anything, but this is what goes on in the story. The boys are stranded on an island after a plane crash. They try to set up society, civilization. Works for a minute, and then it kind of devolves, and then we have the splitting faction, the red-headed kid with his Castle Rock mountain village. And at some point they kill a boar and mount the boar's head for keeps, and the boar's head is the Lord of the Flies, which is really disturbing and gross and dark, and we know why Stephen King would like that. So it's kind of a deity of sorts, and one of the main characters imagine that the Lord of the Flies tells him about the beast. So they have created this story of a beast on the island, this terrible, scary, external monster that's coming, that's going to destroy them, and we don't see signs of that. The Lord of the Flies tells Simon that there is no external physical beast on the island. The beast is within the boys themselves. That is a major theme that Stephen King picked up and ran with in The Gunslinger. Do we remember that internal struggle of Roland not wanting to become a beast? This is back in The Gunslinger. Stephen King writes, I started to tell you about Tull. Is it growing? It's dead, the gunslinger said. I killed it. He thought of adding, "And now I'm going to kill you, if for no other reason than I don't want to have to sleep with one eye open." But had he come to such behavior? If so, why bother to go on at all? Why, if he had become what he pursued? And that conflict grew within Roland as he grappled with what he was going to do with Jake. So he's always pointing his finger at that external beast, the man in black, the treachery of Martin, while meanwhile he's having this internal battle and the beast wins. He sacrifices the child. Stephen King used that word beast in the original Gunslinger. So in the revised version, we don't see that. We're seeing the Crimson King. But the palaver with the man in black and Sylvia Pittston, who know about the beast, the Crimson King. We don't know who that is yet, but they do a little bit. Stephen King's using the word the beast a lot there. So I think that's related. And then he doubled down on that idea, that theme in the drawing of the three. And he was a lot more explicit with it. Do we remember this? So we're going to take you back in time to the drawing of the three. And this is Roland, his internal monologue. King writes, "If you have given up your heart for the tower, Roland, you have already lost. A heartless creature is a loveless creature, and a loveless creature is a beast. To be a beast is perhaps bearable, although the man who has become one will surely pay hell's own price in the end. But what if you should gain your object? What if you should, heartless, actually storm the dark tower and win it? If there is naught but darkness in your heart, what could you do except degenerate from beast to monster? To gain one's object as a beast would only be bitterly comic, like giving a magnifying glass to an elephant. But to gain one's object as a monster, to pay hell is one thing, but do you want to own it?" So that was big. We remember that. And we see the use of the word beast again there because King used that language a lot in the original Gunslinger. And then the drawing of the three was, of course, the second book where he's still using that language. And he went back and revised the Gunslinger, but not the drawing of the three. So remnants of that language there. I think it's a pretty big parallel to that theme in Lord of the Flies, which I think is why Miss Avery is bringing it to our attention. And we still see that theme happening, but now we have a different Roland. We have a Roland that we saw last week or the week before who is dying because of that decision that he made to be a monster. And he wants to rectify his mistake. That is not the action of a beast. What will happen? We don't know, but we're kind of on the edge of our seats, wanting Jake to get back there and wanting Roland to redeem himself. Has he come far enough as a character to drop the idea that things are more important than taking care of the friends that he loves? We've seen him make new friends. He loves these friends. He trusts these friends. He never got that far with Jake because he killed him. We're watching all of that as we continue to read. Let's move on to the conch shell. Miss Avery asks, "What is the significance of the conch?" We are supposed to now be asking that question. She's asking us this question. And then she's setting us up to question other symbolic objects in the reading of the Dark Tower series. In the Lord of the Flies, the kids group together and the conch shell is blown to summon the boys together. And then if you have the conch shell, you're allowed to speak. It's your turn. And so the conch shell symbolizing, representing the answer to the riddle: order, leadership, clear communication, civilization, democracy. And we'll remember again that we're reading a novel called The Wastelands. So that idea of chaos and civilization, the tension between those two things, with the conch symbolizing civilization. I don't want to spoil The Lord of the Flies for you. You should read it or watch it and watch what happens to the conch. Okay, so I think that's what we got there. It's not a surprise then that we're moving into riddles. The next thing out of this final essay is a riddle. When is a door not a door? When it's ajar, and that is the truth. And then we hear about Blaine. Haven't heard that name. We hear some more riddles. I think Blaine's dangerous. So let's think about the structure of the essay so far. And remember that we did Roland's present world, Roland's past world. And now, could this be Roland's future world? Or, hold on. Roland's present world, Jake's past world, Roland's future world, right? Did I get that right? It's a lot to keep track of. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. So we're moving through past, present, past, future, question mark, but a fair assessment assumption to make based on the poem structure. And we come back to Jake's present at the end. So to say Roland's present, past, future, Jake's present is how the structure of this essay goes. And it's not an essay, it's a poem. But hang on, because we'll get to that in a minute. We'll have to see, what does Blaine have to do with anything? Who is it? What is he going to do? Why is Blaine interspersed with these riddles? These riddles are easy. These are easy riddles. When we look at riddles from The Hobbit, these are hard riddles. I don't like riddles. Do y'all like riddles? I'm not a fan. And I don't like it when I hear a riddle. I don't want to think about it. I don't like it when someone's like, I'm not telling you the answer, you have to figure it out. It makes me infuriated. I'm not a fan of the riddles. Here's one from The Hobbit, just to kind of compare and contrast what we're talking about here. So Bilbo Baggins and Gollum are in the caves and they're riddling each other. J.R.R. Tolkien writes, "It cannot be seen, cannot be felt, cannot be heard, cannot be smelt. It lies behind stars and under hills, and empty holes it fills. It comes out first and follows after, ends life, kills laughter." Do you know what it is? I sure didn't. And I'm going to give you the answer so that we're friends from now on. The answer is the dark. I'm not quite sure about it comes out first and follows after. Do you know what that means? And kills laughter, I mean, maybe, but if you're a gothic Dark Tower kind of person, maybe not. But so compare and contrast that kind of riddle to when is a door not a door, when it's ajar, har-ye har har. We notice the difference here. Also, Jake is giving us the answer to the riddles. He's not just posing riddles and then talking about Blaine. He's posing riddles and then answering the riddle. Each time he gives us the answer to the riddle. Notable. Next, Jake's present situation in New York City. I want to go back. I have to go back. I'll go crazy. I can't go home again unless I find a stone, a rose, a door, and that is the truth. I can't go home again. This is mirroring a lot of things. We'll remember all the way back to the very first episode of Dark Tower YouTube, where we looked at the opening excerpt to the entire series in the Revised Gunslinger, which was a quote excerpt from Look Homeward Angel by Thomas Wolfe. And he mentions a stone, a leaf, a door. Of a stone, a leaf, a door. Eddie, will remember from a minute ago, was dreaming of Thomas Wolfe's book, You Can't Go Home Again, and on the cover was a key, a rose, a door. Those symbols are from Look Homeward Angel. I don't know if they're in You Can't Go Home Again, but that's what Eddie's dream was about, going back to New York, being in New York, realizing that he's a different person, so he actually couldn't do that, and he doesn't want to do that. But those symbols were strong, and then he opened the book, and it was the first line of The Gunslinger, and it blew our minds. But we're doing the same thing here, where we have Jake mirroring King in his introduction to his understanding of truth with those excerpts taken from the same poems, word for word sometimes, in the same order. King opening the series with this idea, a stone, a leaf, a door. Eddie bringing it up, a key, a rose, a door. And Jake saying, I can't go home again, tying him to Eddie now, to what Eddie's got going on, and changing it slightly to a stone, a rose, a door. So it's slightly different in each one of those. Now, what did Miss Avery just tell us, class? One must ask certain questions. What is the symbolism? Stone, a leaf, a door. I had to do some digging. We can't ignore that. She just told us you must question these things. There's riddles within riddles and good stories, and here is one. Guys, I don't know how I find this stuff, but I found a thesis. John Michael Berger, if you are out there, thank you. Thank you so much. John Michael Berger submitted a thesis to the Iowa State University in 1988 to get his Master's of Art degree as an English major. And it's published on the internet now for the world to see and to come across when they're trying to figure out what the hell Thomas Wolfe is talking about. I want to get him on the show. Anybody know John Michael Berger? Let's get him on here to dive deeper, because I'm going to read some of what he posited, and we can think about it and continue to think about it, because I believe that we've got a 3-beat there on those symbols, stone, leaf, door. They're slightly different to King, Eddie, and Jake, but they are now a complete 3-beat. Probably we'll be seeing those again. All right. This is in the thesis. The title Wolfe finally settled on, Look Homeward Angel, implies that the soul is symbolized by an angel. Okay, pause, because remember back in The Gunslinger, there's a lot of talk about the soul and Roland's soul and his soul in the Man in Black's pocket, and we had a lot of discussion about that. So I remember that. It is asked, the soul, to look towards its true home, not the body, but the world of ideas. Other worlds than these? Eugene's whole quest, that's the main character in the story, is to do just this. He always has his sight on this home, his real home, his spiritual home, and tries desperately to find a door that leads to the lost lane end into heaven. So this is a spiritual quest. But he ever encounters a wall, though it is a nebulous one, not clearly defined, a wall of light. He gropes for anything that will lead to a passage through it. A stone that can be rolled away from an opening. A leaf that can be picked up off a garden floor, revealing a passageway as it might in a secret garden. A door which is forever unfound. And this is a quote from the book, Look Homeward Angel. Thomas Wolfe writes, "He groped for the doorless land of fairy, that illimitable haunted country that opened somewhere below a leaf or a stone." Wow. Still with John Michael Berger here. These are Wolfe's main symbols and partly the objects of Eugene's search. Kennedy, now Kennedy is somebody who wrote a biography, but it's not really a biography of Thomas Wolfe, it's an analysis of his complete body of work. Kennedy, so this other expert, sees the unfound door as representing not only an entrance into the prenatal life, but also an escape into illusion and the way to life's ultimate secrets. In short, it is the door to a world of spirit. Oh, wow. Okay. And that all, I mean, I read that and I'm like, yes, okay, right. Yes. We're talking about an extra physical shit here, guys. We're talking about a nexus point in space-time that is unraveling and softening time, space, size, dimension. We have portals to other worlds, and death is a portal. Death is one of the doors. We have Jake, of course, with this same yearning that the character in Eugene in Look Homeward Angel has, this yearning for healing. King used that word. I will be healed when I go through that door. Not just physically, but extra physically. A soul level. This is not where I'm supposed to be. I am supposed to be over there. I'm supposed to be over there in that world. Who is I am? Who is I am? But a thought, a concept, another version of you. What does that mean? I don't know, but we love it here at Dark Tower YouTube because we like to churn and spin these things over and think about them and philosophize about them and read about them and pick them apart. And King did too. And he threw that in there ×3 to make you curious about it and to go read Thomas Wolfe and to figure out what our characters are doing with those symbols. They're looking for a way home. Their souls are looking for a way home. Jake is looking for a way back to home. Healing, wholeness. I love it so much. Thank you, John Michael Berger. Reach out if you are out there listening to this video. Wouldn't that be wild, guys? Okay. We are swapping out, like I mentioned, the rose, the key. So we have some swap outs, and we're an hour into this episode, and so we can't do all of that here, but I want you all to be just thinking about that as we go forward. We've seen the key showing up in Eddie's world. So just different ways to get back to our home, our wholeness, our healed, complete spiritual selves. So we get the key. We saw the rose in the fire when we threw the jawbone in. And then we saw the field of roses surrounding the Dark Tower. So we have that symbology showing up as a direct link to the tower in Eddie's dream. Is that what's really going on? I don't know. And so the stone, rolling the stone away from the door, just trying to find it. Where is it? And then the door itself, we see that showing up a lot here in this part of the novel. So let's get back to that. But if you have any other thoughts about that, I think it's cool. There's probably more to, there definitely is more to pull apart there, and perhaps I'll do that someday. Now we get to the choo-choos. This feels nursery rhymey. That has been a theme throughout this series so far. We had the nursery rhymes back in The Gunslinger, The Rain in Spain Falls on the Plain, Chuss it, chass it, bring enough to fill your basket, Did a chuck, did a chim, dada cham, dumma chum in the drawing of the three. Feels like that, something that a kid would get a kick out of. But we don't just have the choo-choos, because that would be too fun. We have I am afraid. And that is the truth in the middle of these choo-choos that are picking up steam, that are moving forward. Miss Avery interrupts our reading again. Thanks, Miss Avery. This is where she talks about Catch 22, comedy of the surreal. And Jake's like, this is my life, lady. So we have to talk about Catch 22 now. Joseph Heller, published 1961. A Catch 22 is a problem for which the only solution is denied by a circumstance inherent in the problem. What does that mean? I have to find my glasses, but I can't find my glasses without my glasses. So there's a catch-22 kind of situation here. The term is also used more broadly to mean a tricky problem or a no-win or absurd situation. Joseph Heller writes, so this is from Catch-22, about the Catch-22 in the novel, which also has to deal with war, the Second World War, I believe, by the way. No, for sure, it's the Second World War. So those themes are wastelandy themes. And remember, the Wastelands poem by T.S. Eliot is post-World War I, like post-apocalyptic, not great kind of stuff. Okay, Heller writes, there was only one catch, and that was Catch-22, which specified that a concern for one's safety in the face of dangers that were real and immediate was the process of a rational mind. Or, now this is not O-R, the whatever part of speech that is, it's O-R-R, it's a character in the book, so I just want to make that clear. Or was crazy, person was crazy, and could be grounded. All he had to do was ask. And as soon as he did, he would no longer be crazy and would have to fly more missions. Or would be crazy to fly more missions, and sane if he didn't, but if he were sane, he had to fly them. If he flew them, he was crazy and didn't have to, but if he didn't want to, he was sane and had to. Yossarian, main character, was moved very deeply by the absolute simplicity of this clause of Catch-22 and let out a respectful whistle. So that's absurd, and it doesn't make a lot of sense, and we get wrapped up in the spherical thinking here, the paradox of it all. Paradox is a main theme in Catch-22, and Heller throws it at us again and again and again. And we have lots of these tricky, paradoxical situations going on currently in the Wastelands, for sure. So let's apply it to the Wasteland. So Jake needs to get back to Roland's world because he's alive in New York City instead of in Roland's world, which is where he feels he needs to be. But he's only alive in his own world now because Roland prevented him from being pushed by Jack Mort from New York City into Roland's world. And the only reason he didn't stay there in the first place, the first time that he was pushed, was because Roland killed him there. We can go down into big paradoxical rabbit holes here, thinking about if Roland had not let Jake fall under the mountains, that would have changed everything. Because if Roland had saved Jake, would the doors on the beach have even been there? And if they were there, would the same people have been behind them? And when he opened the pusher door and saw Jack Mort about to push Jake, and Roland stopped him and didn't kill him, or did kill him, when Jacob just popped out of existence, if Mort had been killed to save Susanna, to sacrifice Jake again. We don't know, because that didn't happen, but it's just paradox upon paradox upon paradox here. And we're feeling that heavily also with Roland in The Gunslinger, with that idea of the beast inside. Roland needs to get to the man in black so that he can get to the tower. And he believes he needs to get to the tower to right some great wrong that's happening. But he believes the only way he can get there is by sacrificing Jake, becoming the wrong himself, in which state, as a monster, he couldn't get to the tower, or he probably couldn't save it anymore. So the solution to the problem prevents the problem from being solved. So there it is again. Pretty cool. Catch-22 is a book that moves around in time, and we have different people telling the story at different times, and it feels very unstructured at first, but when you analyze it, which we're not going to do because that's not what we're doing here, it turns out to be very structured, which is what we saw with this essay, which turns out to be a poem, which when you look at it at first glance, it's not like a B, that kind of schemy, rhymey poem setup, but it is there. And we did see the present, Roland's past, Roland's future, question mark, but this is our understanding of truth and everything else is true in there. So let's say Roland's future, Jake's present, and then bookended by the photographs, which we still need to talk about. And then we have the repetition. That is the truth, that is the truth, that is the truth. Short staccato phrases. It has some structure. The choo-choos go 1, 2, 3, 4 before going back to 1. So it's there when we look. Let's talk about those images. On the first page, we have 10 Downing Street. It's a door. And everyone's like, oh yeah, obviously, we get it. We get the symbology there. Symbolism. Is symbology a word? I think so. But did you know that it's a black door? 10 Downing Street is a black door, or it was a door that was painted black at some point, and we had that Rolling Stones song that Eddie was dreaming about in the last episode. The Amtrak train is an unknown at this point. We have the choo-choose in here, and that's making us say, well, there's a train involved somehow, maybe. The choo-choos fall out of that present, past, future, present. We don't know where those fit in, but they're there, and we have an Amtrak train. I don't know, we'll have to see what that's all about. And then on the last page we have, wait a minute, I have it written down here. The final picture, or maybe I left off. Anyway, it's the Leaning Tower. It is Balazar's nightclub, and there's black scribbles all over it. I did read that earlier on. So again, we have like tower vibes, dark tower vibes, very literal interpretation. Let's remember though that the Leaning Tower was the name of Balazar's nightclub, his bar, if you will. So that's something, kind of tying Eddie back to Jake again. And another thing tying them together is Eddie's dream, where the tower had that black smoke monstery cloud, flaggy cloud coming out and coming at him. And so this kind of lunatic loops, or whatever King is saying, feels like that dream to me, which would be tying Eddie and Jake together again in this image. So not just, oh, it's the Dark Tower, but there's a lot of Eddie in here. All right. I think that's it. We have a little bit more before we end chapter 3. Jake is just dumbfounded, dumbstruck by what he wrote. Again, no recollection of this, but telling us that he did channel the truth. And inside he knows exactly what's going on some level. He just doesn't know what to make of it, and we picked at it a little bit, but we'll have to see how it plays out. He imagines his teacher handing this to his parents, proving his insanity to them, and he just panics and he's like, I gotta get out of here. This is bad, bad, bad. He leaves class. He leaves the essay on the desk, but by the time he realizes, oh, I should have taken it with me, it's too late. He can't go back for it because he's asked to go to the bathroom, and you don't take your essay to the bathroom, so he just leaves the school. King writes, Jake reached the door leading to the hall, and as he grasped the knob, that feeling of hope and surety rose in him again. This is it, really it. I'll open the door, and the desert sun will shine in. I'll feel that dry wind on my face. I'll step through and never see this classroom again. He opened the door, and it was only the hallway on the other side. But he was right about one thing just the same. He never saw Miss Avery's classroom again. Dun, dun, dun. So we have the classic King-ism there that we love, and that kind of builds this tension in the reader. He's not ever going back there again. Why not? What's going to happen? We're going to find out reading the book, but on the next episode of Dark Tower YouTube, we will pick up there and see what awaits Jake Chambers outside of his classroom. That was fun. Did you guys have fun? Are you still here? I love to hear from y'all. You can tell me in the comments that you're excited to be on the journey. Are you loving the wastelands? What do you think about the deep dive into the final essay? What did I miss? What did I miss? Because there's always things that I miss, and I read it the 6th time and I find something new, and the 7th time, etc. So I'm sure I missed something, and maybe you all picked it up. Tell me. Tell me, tell me, tell me. I am excited to come back and join you all here again. Thank you for listening, liking, subscribing, commenting. You can reach out at realityremixradio@gmail.com if you want to talk. If you are my friend who wrote the thesis that helped me out so much in this episode. And that's it for today. Until we meet again, my Dark Tower friends, may you have long days and pleasant nights.